Hello and welcome to this description. I'm doing this for what would be my good vibrations reading for the week of October 29th, 2017. And I am switching things up this week because we're in the Scorpio energy, and so there's an intensity to the energy, but also just kind of getting real with ourselves in a different kind of a way, in a more earthy, or it's even sub-earth, it's below the surface, and it gets things a little simpler, I would say. And so I've been receiving over the past couple of weeks these, all I can call them is blocks of thought. And sometimes it comes through when I sleep, and other times when I'm driving, I'm getting more clear as I'm driving to work. So I just felt I had a calling from my team, my high spirit self, to begin sharing these. I had tried to start writing them down, and the writing feels just so sluggish to me. And then I start perfecting, my perfectionist self starts coming out, and I get too drowned in all of it. So I think video is probably the best way for me to communicate on these. So instead of cards, I'm giving these blocks of thought. So if you chose the image of the cogwheels, that's what I call them. They're like, if you consider like the inner workings of a clock, there's all these wheels, and they come together, and they have little teeth that and the little inlets, that's equally important here, that come together, and they create something really helpful. And I can't help but tie astrology in with some of these descriptions, because it's just a part of my role as a messenger, that astrology, I feel, does play a big part in helping us along this experience here in life. And when you decide to come to Earth, I know the rising sign. I am on a mission to make the rising sign more important and more of a focus than the sun sign. The sun is like your masculine energy. It's how you bring yourself. It's your personality and all that stuff. But the rising sign, that is the point in your chart that is like the facet of this enormous diamond that you are in your wholeness. It is the very facet that wants to be buffed up when you come into this life. So it gives us a little focus, because we can be anything at any time, and we always have that ability to kind of morph and change how we want to go about life. But that rising sign gives you some aspect of what the soul's kind of looking to buff up in this life, that what the soul is wanting for experience. And across the way in your chart, a direct line across goes to the descendant point. And that is kind of the way in which the soul can best meet that desire of buffing up that facet. It gives us a little bit more information in terms of, not from a big esoteric standpoint, but in this life, what does that really look like? Okay? And that, to me, is the descendant point. And so it's no accident. The descendant point kicks off what is known as your 7th house. You have 12 houses that make up your life, and that includes everything that there is about your life. All fits within this wheel. That's why this is so important, this cogwheel understanding that I was given. That 7th house that this descendant point kicks off, that is other people. It is your relationships with other people. It certainly contains some of the most important relationships you have, such as with a spouse or a close partner, your parents, your very close family members. But really, it extends out to this idea of relationships. Okay, so that's no accident. The soul, whatever your soul is looking, whatever facet on that huge diamond that you are, whatever facet wants to be let's kind of look at this one. Let's kind of just go in and have some fun buffing that up. The way you do that is what I call the rub against other people. It's every time you have interactions with another, and sometimes they're like butter. They're just easy. You must know those people in your life. You get together with them and it's just like, oh, this is just awesome. Like you almost complete each other's sentences. It's easy. And I call those butter. They're butter rubs. They're just so nice. And the soul loves all of it, because that's why it's your descendant point. The soul loves all of that, and it's all gathering experience, every rub you have. Then there's, on the other extreme, are what I would call the sandpaper people, the sandpaper rub, which is you rub up against them and there is the biggest, most annoying sense of grit there that you're just like, oh, and all of that. The soul soaks it up and is like, okay, because every time you have the rub, whether it's butter or on the other extreme, it's sandpaper and it's a tough grit, you are getting clear. You are getting more clear. You're shining. You're actively buffing. More of defining yourself, because we all know that we have the choice in how we respond. We have the choice in how that plays out, in how we choose to use our perception to look at that person. And we can say, yes, that is a tough grit person that I am rubbing up against. But there's something here for me. There's something here. And a lot of times it will make you very clear on what you believe in and what matters to you. It helps you to create that sense of your own principles. And do you notice that over time, sometimes that changes, and some of those tough grit sandpaper rub people, sometimes they can turn into butter people. I have had that happen in my life. And it's because you have gained something and all of a sudden there's nothing to learn there. There's no more experience there. So it just becomes easy. Or they literally vibrate out of your life. That's the way energy works. There's no more rub to be had between you. So they drift out. The work there is done. The sandpapering work has been accomplished. And they aren't even needed as a butter rub sort of person in your life, because you've completed your work together. So in terms of the wheel, not only is this important to think about the astrological chart, which is always a round wheel, and it has all of these spokes in it that create the 12 houses. And of course, I'm personally fascinated by all that because it makes you incredibly unique. You have a rising sign, and there is a point, there is a Sabian symbol associated with that. You have your descendant, and you have these other points that I review in a chart reading, and that you personally can. You don't need to come to me. You can review that too. And so the idea that my team gave me behind the wheel, and particularly cogwheels, is that cogwheels have teeth and they have inlets. And what they were showing me is, like I was getting a lot of this visually, is that sometimes those wheels come together, and this is you with that other person. Remember, kickoff of the 7th house, other people. Sometimes they come together. That's butter. Those wheels are greased. That's another way to think of it. Easy. And it's productive energy. Can you feel that? You get a lot done. You get things accomplished, even if it's just in terms of you both feeling emotionally satisfied, or you could, physically be working together and getting just lots of things are lining up and your energies are working together. And what makes them work together so well is when your tooth the part of your wheel fits in with their inlet. This is the idea of masculine and feminine energy, okay? And it is all about there being a receptacle and there being a push, some kind of an action forward, okay? And of course, as I'm doing this, I'm thinking about, obviously, this is related to sex too. Can't deny that. I keep it real. So it's all intertwined here. This is all the same sort of thing. It is those energies. They're playing together. And no, on a cogwheel, you have all kinds of teeth and you have all kinds of receptacles. And so the beauty is in the constant shift between the two. Is this a time when I'm pushing an idea out, or is this a time that I'm receiving? And so the concept of the cogwheel is that have an awareness of, am I always acting as the teeth part of the cogwheel, or am I allowing some of the receptivity, and vice versa? Because in a beautiful, well-oiled cogwheel system, there is another that is involved, and that is people in your experience, and it is everything. It is receiving of information through television and video and all of the various stimuli. It's ultra powerful when it is in-person types of interactions. And again, we're buffing up that facet on the diamond for you. So it's worth it to add your attention and awareness to these areas. But the beauty of the cogwheel system is the fact that there are literally alternating to, a teeth, prong, we'll call it a prong and a receptacle and a prong and a receptacle. It is the constant flow. And so the way you can start to think about this is that just understand, if you're always pushing, that is the prong. If you're trying to get your point across and you're pushing yourself out there constantly, you're never willing to receive any ideas. You're never willing to receive any help. You're never willing to kind of sit back quietly and just kind of watch the energy play out, and then feel intuitively when I think I've got something to say here. And it depends with that other person. Are you in a place where they're willing to hear? And all of this is meant to bring us a sense of compassion for one another and understanding that we are all cogs. We are all cogwheels. And that we all have teeth and we all have receptacles. And by bringing more awareness to, are you always in a teeth moment, or are you always in a receptacle moment? And how often? Because certainly those gears could be off, and if there's enough force, or if there is enough of a kind of passive energy, either of those directions, there certainly can be a forced motion, a forced energy where the wheels could come together and they're not perfectly fit, but they come together and they make something happen anyway. But in that process, there is kind of a breaking of the gear, so to speak. The gear doesn't hold its integrity, and over time, if that continues to happen, there can be cracks that develop, and eventually it breaks, and eventually the system doesn't work at all. And I've experienced this with horses when there is so much force put upon them. They will either try to fight back with more force and become more aggressive, or they will become totally passive and just give in, and it literally breaks their spirit, which is incredibly sad to see because of the force of the other. And therefore the cog becomes splintered. It literally cracks and it can never be the same again. It can never be restored again, because there is an exertion of the energy, or it is so passive that it's almost like a wallflower. And, it's kind of, not to be brutal, but welcome to Scorpio season. It's kind of a raping of the spirit. It's just laying back and whatever, you walk all over me, that's fine. And so this concept was shown to me, and I was seeing it through mostly the imagery. It was shown to me as a way to bring greater respect for each other, and to be aware, if you're not feeling like there's anything productive happening, to take a look at your own cog, and to take a look at, are my teeth, are some of the, let's say, teeth worn down, and pretty much in one section all I have is like receptacle activity, where I'm just like, okay, I'm just taking it like a fire hose to the mouth, I'm just keep bringing it. And you're just like, I think of the Memorex commercial where the guy's in the seat and it's just like wind, literally blowing him nearly out of the chair. Fire hose to the mouth. Is that noticing if you're experiencing that in parts of your life? Because remember, this is a wheel, and your astrological chart has 12 sections to it. So maybe it's only in one area. But to bring awareness to it, and to know that you are the engineer that has the best skills and talent and wisdom to look at that area and to say, okay, I need to create the teeth in that section again. And I don't mean to say it as teeth like, like a growly little dog that just wants to rip your head off. I am not saying it that way at all. I am saying there are times when we can be quiet and we can take in information. But then notice if you're just staying in that mode, because in essence your cog is almost not moving. It's just like staying in that direction, that location. There has to be an output of energy for it to feel productive to your soul, to that part that wants to shine up the facet on the diamond. So this was given to bring the awareness of thinking about, this is a fun way to think about your life, is that we are all cogs. And to understand that sometimes people, their teeth and receptacle portions of their cogwheels don't always line up either. Sometimes they've got like all teeth in an area, or all receptacle, or it's really getting worn out and they kind of need a whole new wheel. It's a kind of a complete reset. That happens for all of us too. And to give each other the bandwidth, the time, okay, we're shutting down the production line, we're going to change out this wheel and we're going to get them greased up and we're going to try this again. And to understand things start slowly, and to allow that momentum to naturally build. But noticing, is it a productive interaction or not? And I want to say this also within you, because that was the other imagery that I was being shown, is that these wheels, these cogwheels, are also embedded. So I was being given imagery that was like a big wheel, and then there were smaller and smaller and smaller wheels, almost like a Russian doll, nesting doll, where these wheels are all kind of embedded, and sometimes they get elongated and you can see each level of different wheels, and then sometimes not, and that they're all like spinning like this. That was what I was being shown about this energy pattern. And again, this is a concept that you could try out, is even making it a very, very personal exercise for yourself of, how is that, it's literal masculine, feminine energy balance of, are my own cogs working well together? Because when this idea was being shown, the best and the most efficient and productive energy was being created when they were all allowed to be working as individual aspects, but there was tremendous momentum built, almost like it created like a turbine, is what I saw. Is if you consider all these levels, that they were just working like this, and they were creating energy that increased your vibration, essentially increased the vibe that you give out, like a huge radio tower. It was that kind of feeling. So noticing, when is the energy lining up and when is it not? If you are in situations even within yourself where you're like, okay, I am not getting anything productive out of this. Are you in a moment of like too many teeth and it's not lining up with the energy that is the biggest part of you, that is that diamond facet, which is always pristine, it's always there, it's always available. But if we've just got teeth and no receptacles, then it's likely you're just like pushing to make things happen, and you're not allowing anything to kind of be shown to you, to kind of soak in and allow, really, when there's too many teeth, it's allowing yourself to see that things are happening to move you along your path. Because the whole point of the cogwheel system is to create productive energy. That's why they were showing it to me. And that you need another energy. You need other viewpoints. You need other people. You need other parts within yourself in order to make that productive energy. So for instance, a cogwheel by itself is pretty pointless, isn't it? So and I experienced this, I feel like I should give an example of this. So when I began to make my shift into kind of metaphysical, intuitive work, there was a part of me that I just wanted to stay in my little office here and just do these things. And I didn't want to be outward about it because I honestly was afraid of what people would think. And so it took a lot for me to start doing videos, because I was honestly afraid that, people, especially that I knew, would think, oh my God, she has gone off her rocker. But so there was that resistance. I had so many receptacles. I was receiving so much, but I didn't have many tines. I didn't have many of these spokes, because I was frightened, and I thought, ugh. So then it finally became so overwhelming, and I knew that if I didn't change it, that I was either going to have to leave this work altogether. Yeah, really, that was my only choice, because I was getting too much of a flood of information and too much of a literal calling. For instance, it makes no sense to me as to I take a Reiki class and then I am driven to go work with horses, and my aunt and uncle had just opened a horse farm. And I was going up there twice a week after work. I had no idea why. I don't own a horse. I don't ever want to own a horse. I haven't ridden since I was 12 years old, and I don't want to ride. And I didn't like riding then. I liked hanging out in the stall with them. So for some reason, there are times in your life that it is a calling. And so that really is the receptacle piece. It is a calling. It's literally pulling you. Okay, there's another tine. That soul tine is coming around, and if there's a receptacle there and you flow with it, you're literally like magnetized. And then very productive energy starts happening as you come into and you accept, you allow is really the best word. You allow that calling. And sometimes it will be events. From a divine perspective, events can happen, and that causes you to then go into a certain new mindset, a certain, like, forced circumstances. Definitely. Certain things, it brings a purposefulness to life that I have found to be incredibly productive. Like, there are reasons for why these things happen. And for me, I'm saying for me, that has been a really productive exercise. I have gotten really good things out of trying on that mindset, okay? Because I see it as a divine interaction that helps me then to grow and prosper and become more efficient and effective in who I came here to be. I really do feel like the universe has my back. I really do feel like I am on a path, and that it is a divine path, and everybody has a divine path. We are all walking an individual path. And so the circumstances kind of help us along. But we have to be receptive. And then the key is, like, this is where the book The Secret was a start of my journey. I love the law of attraction, but to me it has since kind of fallen short. It's just the beginning chapter. In this example of the wheel, you might get the divine inspiration, but then there's a time when action is needed, and so that's the time moment. So you ask, you receive the divine inspiration, and then you act, and that's how the tines work together. You're working with your universal self. But it takes the awareness, the openness, okay, to be willing to do that. So I'll give another example here. And this has been just a concept that came to me because a very special angel in my life posted something on Facebook, and it was about a book that she had bought around animal communication from animals. So of course it caught my interest because that's how I started my business. And there was a little bit in there about horses, and I'm thinking, okay, they've got like a little, probably one part of a chapter on a horse. I could easily write a whole book, easy. I could write multiple books about horses. But it was the being in the receptive mode to say, oh, notice what takes your attention. And so I immediately, in that moment, I was like, I could do that. And I could devote multiple books to horses in what they've taught me and what they continue to teach me, and what they teach me through the relationships with their owners/riders. And in that moment of receptivity, then I felt compelled to write to a very dear friend of mine who's a trainer and a rider herself, longtime rider, very well respected. And then I felt called to write to another person who does equine services. She's a farrier, and these are people that I hold in incredibly high integrity in my mind. But it was receptivity because it was like ding ding. They just immediately came to me, and I wrote to them. I said, we really should write a book. We should write a book about the many sides, the many different views that we have collected from working with hundreds of horses. Each of us has worked with hundreds of horses at this point, and we have different perspectives. So this is where, and that energy, I want you to think about examples in your life when you notice what you notice. You like, oh, that really took my attention. And then you do some little kind of action. Receptive, your receptacle on the cogwheel. You notice what you notice. Something is coming in. Are you noticing it? Then, what's up next? Right after the receptacle? A tine. One of the teeth. Coming around. And the universe is like, yep, what do you want? And on we go. Are you taking some kind of an action? This is where I feel the secret kind of falls down, because the secret kind of says, okay, I want $1 million check to come in the mail to me, and then it doesn't end, like tell the next part of the story, like to receive divine inspiration, to notice what goes on in your environment that sparks something within you when you're a receptacle. And then you take some kind of action. You don't just sit on the couch and wait for the check to come in. There's action, there's inspired action that happens next. So that's where the energy, it continues. I think the reason my team was giving this to me and showing me, there was such visual reference in this block of thought that I received. It's the fact that the wheel keeps turning round and round. So understand that you might receive some information, but then what the heck are you going to do with it? Are you going to sit on it and just let the receptacles keep building up, or are you going to take an action? And when it's this, like this book example that I gave you, and I don't know what form it's going to come into, we're just talking about it actually this evening. So, but it's when I felt that inspiration to then contact them, to then take a motion and action forward. And I wrote it in the sweetest way that I could. Like, I know this might sound crazy, but what do you think about this? Because I really value their input. I really hold them in high integrity. And so then you become, the energy feels so productive is the best way to put it. And it keeps bubbling because the energy keeps moving. It becomes very efficient. It feeds upon itself and things just line up. And I just have a sneaking suspicion that that project will create its own momentum that will make it incredibly easy to follow through on. So it's being aware, noticing what inspiration is calling your attention, noticing if you're in so much of an output, a teeth kind of a mode, that are you allowing any inspiration to reach you? Or do you think that you have to be the teeth to make everything happen? Because essentially in that case, much like the horses feel, if you're just a cog by yourself spinning around, nobody's going to want to come play with you. Because if you're just a bunch of teeth and you have no receptacles, there's no way for anybody to engage. And meanwhile, if you're just a smooth wheel and there's no teeth, people aren't going to want to engage in that either. Because there's no rub, as I was saying before. There's nothing to engage with. Even if it's easy, that's a greased wheel. Don't we all love that greased wheel feeling? It's easy. But there has to be some teeth. There has to be some exchange. So it's knowing the wheel keeps moving. That's a key concept here. So in essence, this too shall pass if you're kind of feeling like you're in a total receptacle mode. And meanwhile, keep in mind, everybody's wheels spin at different speeds. That's another key point. So if you're spinning really slow, kind of like the planet Pluto, which barely moves at all, if you're in that kind of a phase, like a receptacle phase, as I was saying before, can feel incredibly long. You're the guy in the seat and the wind is blowing at you, or you got the fire hose to the mouth and you're like, I don't think I can take anymore. Kind of like me, starting this job, this business, and me staying here and I'm receiving all this inspiration and I'm getting all this information from horses and I'm like, I have to have an output for this or I'm going to combust. It's too long of a receptacle period. And then how are you taking inspired action to give a masculine output of that energy? Because again, you weren't meant to come here and either be a completely smooth wheel that rubs up against nobody or a wheel with only teeth, like literally just a bunch of spikes. You aren't here to be that either, because then you never receive divine inspiration. So it has to be this play of the two, just like windshield wipers. That's what creates the clear journey. is there's the shifting of your masculine and feminine energy, receptacle and teeth, the tines. Okay, and knowing you're always rubbing, in really taking pleasure in rubbing up against others, in creating productive energy together. That feels really good from a soul perspective. So you start to have an appreciation of those moments instead of dreading them. And seeing how is it that we could have a more productive relationship? Or is this too splintered and cracked to even work any longer? And that does happen. So I hope this is helpful. I would appreciate people's comments, and just my team was giving me a lot of information over the past couple weeks through this. For this concept, it was imagery, really strong imagery, and understanding that too, energy can clearly line itself up for you if you're making yourself aware of the receptacle of the cogwheel system, and understanding that we're all going at different paces. There are different size wheels, and even wheels within yourself, and how well those are working and kind of helping each other along. Is it productive? And that when you have that awareness, then the universe is a huge diamond wheel, meaning like a diamond blade, in different types of, I think it's a saw that has a diamond blade that cannot be chipped. And that's the big you. That's the big, high spirit version of you that is always moving. But are you in alignment? Are you receiving, and are you giving out? When you feel that inspired action come about, because when you do, life gets really magical. And I've experienced this numerous times, and I think I'm about to again with this this writing project that we're thinking about. So anyway, that's enough for now, and I wish you well. Keep those cogs moving on.